This is a bail. Sorry.
Yes. I think you did that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Criminal assistance, $1,000 cash bail, as well as stay away to contact from the alleged victim. With respect to the alleged facts, this incident occurred Saturday evening, approximately 8:15. Officers of the Lowell Police Department began investigating an incident involving, in this case, Mr. Richard Brogan. He was transported from 585 Broadway Street to St. Memorial Hospital, suffering from injuries that he sustained from an altercation that occurred at that 585 Broadway Street. The officers learned that Mr. Brogan's injuries were very serious. At first, he had stopped breathing while from the Broadway Street address to the hospital. He had to be intubated and ventilated. He was then placed in intensive care. He was released from the hospital yesterday. Mr. Brogan, I apologize. The officers spoke to Ms. Angela Taylor, who resides in that building on Broadway Street. She indicated that she witnessed the assault. She said that she heard the fire alarm going off in her apartment building. She went outside and saw 4 males arguing with another male. She saw also her third-floor neighbor, Ms. Nellie Tomlin, with those males. She then saw one of the males who she knows as this defendant, Joseph Peltier, who is Ms. Tomlin's grandson, punched Mr. Brogan in the head. At that point, Ms. Tomlin yelled, "Kick his ass," a few times in the direction of Mr. Brogan at the other individuals who were there. Mr. Brogan, again the alleged victim in this case, and Mr. Peltier then began to have an altercation. And at that point, 3 other males came over and started kicking Mr. Brogan while he was down on the ground. According to Ms. Taylor, Mr. Peltier was also kicking Mr. Brogan at that time while he was on the ground. The 4 males who were doing this had stopped at one point, went back into the apartment at 585 Broadway Street. Ms. Tomlin also went back into the apartment, leaving Mr. Brogan on the ground. Ms. Taylor is the one who called 911. The officers then responded. They tried contacting Ms. Tomlin as well as the defendant, Mr. Peltier. They both agreed to accompany officers to the police station where they were both interviewed separately. Mr. Peltier told the detectives that Mr. Brogan had been at his grandmother's residence, and that she had asked him, Mr. Brogan, to leave at that time, because according to Mr. Peltier, Mr. Brogan was making unwanted advances towards his grandmother. He indicated that it was Mr. Brogan who pulled the fire alarm, and at that point, the defendant, as well as Ms. Tomlin and 2 other males who were known to Mr. Peltier, confronted Mr. Brogan outside the building.
Quiet, please.
He indicated that a fight ensued during that time, at which point Mr. Brogan was kicked and beaten by Mr. Peltier and 2 other males. Mr. Peltier told the officers that he blacked out and that he did not know how many times he had hit Mr. Brogan. He also indicated that at one point Mr. Brogan fell to the ground and wasn't able to move, and it was at that time that he and the other males fled the scene. The officers then spoke to Mr. Peltier's grandmother, Ms. Tomlin, who indicated that Mr. Brogan was making advances towards her in her apartment. She had asked him to leave. She indicated that her grandson, Mr. Peltier, was protecting her, and that they followed Mr. Brogan outside after he left the apartment, and again, Mr. Brogan pulled the fire alarm. Ms. Tomlin indicated that she told Mr. Peltier, quote, "I told him to kick his brains in," that she didn't care if he died. Ms. Tomlin also indicated that she and her grandson, after the beating, returned to her apartment. Mr. Peltier is 17 years old. He does have a juvenile record with a few defaults on it. He did show up in court. He did show up. He did show up in court this morning, however, due to the serious allegations, the fact that Mr. Brogan while he was in the hospital, stopped breathing, had to be resuscitated and put on the ventilator. While he has, it appears he's doing much better, he was released from ICU yesterday. I would ask for that. I'm sorry. He was released from the hospital. I would ask Your Honor to set it back on cash bail based on the serious allegations. Yes, thank you.
Your Honor, there appears that there's more than one victim. From my speaking with my client and reading the police report and speaking to my client's mother, it appears that Ms. Tomlin is a victim of an uncharged indecent assault and battery by Mr. Brogan. It appears that Mr. Brogan went out when he left Ms. Tomlin's apartment, pulled a fire alarm, and that wasn't the only thing. He was punching holes in the walls of, he was punching holes in the wall of the hallway of the building. So the landlord of 585 Broadway is also a victim of an uncharged crime. And it was the behavior of Mr. Brogan, not only inside the apartment, but what he did after he left the apartment, which is what precipitated this incident, namely the fire alarm and punching a hole. My client indicates, Your Honor, that although the police report says that my client and Ms. Tomlin were asked to come down and agreed to go down to the police station, my client tells me that he was actually arrested and taken down to the police station. So I take some object to that part of the police report. It characterizes the nature of how he traveled down to the police station. My client indicates that Mr. Brogan was the aggressor throughout this quietly incident. That it was after Mr. Peltier and some of his friends went outside to find out why Mr. Brogan was committing these acts of destruction on his property and killing them with a fire alarm, that Mr. Brogan actually attacked one of his friends. This gentleman standing right over, sitting in the back, please stand up, sir, who has a black eye, because he was punched by Mr. Brogan. And then after he attacked him, he then went after Mr. Peltier and tried to hit Mr. Peltier twice. That's what started this practice, was this altercation. So it appears that Mr. Brogan got a little bit more than he bargained for when he tried to attack four youths outside this apartment. Now, I wasn't there, Your Honor, so I don't know what words were actually said, but it appears that my client indicates that he has never admitted to kicking anyone. He says he never kicked Mr. Brogan, that he actually punched Mr. Brogan twice because Mr. Brogan hit him. I don't know, obviously I don't know what's on the video or the recording, but he was bailed out, and the bail was, I believe, $40. He showed up here. He showed up here today, Your Honor. He's in the company of his grandmother and his mother, who came here. I think that with my personal cognizance, Your Honor, he would show up at all court hearings. He is 17. He's born in Lowell. Obviously, he has ties to Lowell, and his family lives here. Lives with his grandmother and his mother at the address of 585 Broadway. He has a 10th grade, which is trying to get back into a charter school right now in Run. And I would ask that he be on personal cognizance. It appears that there are at least two other youths whose names have been turned over to the Lowell Police Department. I'm being told that the Lowell Police Department is trying to speak with them about their action and participation in this matter. But this gentleman, this young man back here, is one of the people who will be able to testify for the defense that Mr. Brogan was the aggressor, who sustained the black eye here to support his cause.
Mr. Peltier did commit an arraignment, correct?
He did,
And I don't consider him a partner. That's the usual formula of the bill. This is what the personal county was on. The condition, Mr. Peltier, that you have no contact with Mr. Brogan under any circumstances for any reason. You understand that? I hear you. If you violate that condition, you're charged with any new offenses. Any new offenses. Well, this case is pending. You could be held in jail for up to 60 days. If I see you again here with a new offense considering the serious nature of this offense, I'm going to hold you on. I'm going to revoke your bail. You need to stay out of trouble, completely install it, and have no contact with Mr. Brogan. What day all right, Mr.
March 8th?
For the March 8th
Pre-trial hearing here in the first session.